So here's your low speed, high speed. Hey guys, Dan with Kane Custom Garage, and today I want to show you how to adjust the carburetor on these old chainsaws. You know, I've been collecting these chainsaws for over 10 years now, and there's two things I always struggled with. First thing being adjusting the carburetors and getting them to run right, and the second was sharpening chain. And I'm still working on both of those, but I feel like I've learned enough over the years to, you know, maybe give some people some pointers on how to get these things adjusted and get them running right. So hopefully this video helps you out. So let's get into it. So the first thing on these chainsaws, in order to tune the carburetor correctly, the chainsaw itself has to be in decent condition. Mainly, you know, ignition, you know, you got a fresh spark plug, crankshaft seals are good, because if you have leaking crankshaft seals, it's going to run too lean, and then you're never going to be able to get the carburetor to adjust right. So this is assuming that you have a decent saw that's in decent shape. And so yeah, I'm going to attempt to show you what I've learned over the years. So what we got today is this McCulloch 1010 chainsaw. This is a Pro Mac 1010. We got a Homelite XL12, and we got a little Craftsman, which is made by Poulan, a Poulan 25DA. So I thought we'd just sort of fool around, adjust the carburetors on them a little bit. But first, I wanted to go over some of the basics. So there's basically two stages on these chainsaw carburetors. You have the low jet, which controls the idle mixture and your off idle throttle response. And then you have your high jet, which is your wide open throttle performance. And I've made me a little learning tool to sort of help, you know, get it in your brain, because it took me a while, you know, to learn this stuff. So basically you got your engine here, and then you have your low jet is always the closest to the motor, and then you have your high jet, and it's basically the same thing, you know, righty tighty, lefty loosey, right? So when you open the valves, you're giving it more fuel. When you're closing the valves, you're giving it less fuel. And so that's all it is you're just controlling how much fuel the chainsaw is getting on the low side, and then you're also controlling how much fuel it's getting on the high side. And so you always want to adjust the low side first. And usually, as a rule of thumb, you know, on your carburetor, say you rebuild your carburetor and you get it all back together, I always start out, turn the jets all the way in until it stops, not super tight, just till it stops, and then turn it out 1 1/4 turns, 1.5 turns, and it'll probably start and run on that. And then you can do the same thing on the high end, 1 turn, 1 1/4 turn, something like that. So anyways, hopefully this gives you a visual. Engine side, low jet, high jet. High jet's always the furthest away from the engine, because if you think about it, when the throttle opens, it's getting to the low side first, and then when it opens more, there's more little holes inside the throat of the carburetor that it engages when it gets to the high. So that's why the low's closest, and then the high is further away from the motor. So anyways, that's my little learning tool. So yeah, so you have your low jet, high jet, and then there's going to be another screw that adjusts your idle speed, and that's all it does. It just adjusts how much throttle it has when it's idling. That's the idle speed. It has nothing to do with the mixture. So the two mixtures and then the throttle speed adjustment. And so the first thing you want to adjust is your low speed, which is these McCullochs, you got to take the top off. But your low speed, like on this Homelite, your low speed's here, high speed's here, and then the idle adjustment is here. And then this little Poulan, you got to take the top off. So most of your modern chainsaws are going to have little have little orifices like this so you can get your screwdriver in without taking it apart. So anyways, that's sort of the basics of how it all works. And so I thought what we would do is I'll strap that GoPro on my head and then I can explain it while I'm doing it. Okay guys, let's take a look at these chainsaws and see if we can adjust the carburetors on them. So let's do this XL12 first. So here's your low speed, high speed, and then here's the idle speed screw. So this is the low speed mixture, high speed mixture. This screw just adjusts how fast it idles. It has nothing to do with the mixture. So first thing you want to do is fire it up, get it warmed up. Always make sure your saw's warmed up. And then what you want to do, so what we'll do is we'll turn this screw in until it starts to, you turn it in until it's idling the fastest, and then keep turning it until it starts to slow down, and then back it up. It'll idle up again, then back it up some more, and then it'll start to slow down again, and then turn it in a little bit to where you're like right in the middle, and that's where you want it initially anyways. And so like if you're first starting out with a fresh carb or you don't know where you're at, just turn the idle mixture screws in all the way until they stop, until they bottom out, and then back them out like a turn and a quarter, and that should be enough to where it'll run. Turn and a quarter, turn and a half, something like that. So anyways, let's get this thing warmed up. So see, that sounds pretty good. We got good throttle response, and it's idling without loading up. And then if you needed to adjust your idle speed, you could do that here, turn it in or out. So the low end seems good. So let's turn it on. Let's fire it up and do the high speed. And what we'll do is we'll turn it on, we'll start it up, and then we'll rev up the motor. And then listen, when I lean this out, it'll really smooth out and you can hear it go whang. But you don't want it that high like that. So we'll get to that point and then we'll back it off a little bit to where when you rev it up, it 4 strokes on the high end, or it sort of blubbers on the high end, like blah, 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 like that. You want it to do that because that means that it's not too lean. So let's try that. So did you hear that? So we turned it in until it was singing, super smooth with no blubbering, but that's too lean. You want to back it off a little bit to where it starts blah, 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 a little bit on the high end, because that means that it's right and it'll clean itself up in the wood. Because when it blubbers like that, when you're freewheeling it, when you're revving it with not under a load, it's just, I mean, in my mind, it just means that the motor's getting ahead of itself and it can't burn all the fuel. But when you got a load on it, it gets it down and it starts to pull down where it can pull the fuel but not get ahead of itself. So it'll blubber with no load, but once you put a load on it, it'll smooth out. So let's try that. Let's cut some wood. Come on. There. That seems right to me. It was cutting okay the first time, but then I richened it up just a little more on the high end, and it seemed to be a little happier there. And you'd rather have it a little rich than too lean, because then you won't burn your saw up. Okay, so there's that guy. Let's try this Mac 1010. These ones are a little funky because you got to take the cover off to adjust them. So let's see where this one's at. I actually had it pretty close, but we'll tune on it a little more just for the heck of it. So let's get her started, warm it up. Okay, see that on this one, guys? This saw probably has a small air leak because I turned that idle mixture all the way in, and it still wanted to idle, so it probably has some crank seals going out in it, because I haven't done the crank seals on this. So that's a little interesting. Okay, so this saw's obviously got some kind of air leak, but did you see that? We turned it all the way in on the idle circuit and it was still idling. And then yeah, I was trying to richen it up on the high end and it just wasn't cooperating. Interesting. So that's something else to look for. If your saw has if it has seals leaking or an air leak somewhere, then you're never gonna get the carburetor right. So we'll put this guy aside and let's try this little guy. Let's get him warmed up. Okay, this thing's a little ripper. I love this little saw. These little Poulans, they get a bad rap because the fuel line goes to crap in them and then nobody wants them because it's a pain in the butt to fix. But they're a good little saw. So see this saw? Whoops. So you got your low end, high end, idle adjustment. So this one, let's see how this one adjusts. Okay, that's good. Right there. She's a blubbering in the cut, or blubbering when she's revving up on no load. But it should clean up in the cut. So let's see how she does. So there it is. I fattened that one up just a little bit on the high end, and now it wants to pull really good. So you can sort of tell when they're too lean that they sort of want to starve out on the high end. So err on the fat side if you can. Give them more fuel, and then they won't burn up on you. So this guy needs some crank seals or something. But hopefully that tells you or helps you adjust them carbs and let you see how it's supposed to sound and what to look for. You know, if you can't get them to adjust, like this guy obviously has an air leak or something. So anyways, hope that helps, guys. and we'll catch you on the next one.